Hello, welcome to this next part. I'm still learning the same stuff because I'm doing it the same day. Gonna be talking about Joshua 5. Today we're gonna be talking about Joshua 5. And so this is a little bit, I think this one's gonna be less long than the last one. It's pretty simple. The first thing is over circumcision. Woo! Woo! Fun to learn about. So this is just gonna be some kind of random stuff first. So it's interesting because the first thing that, not the very first thing, but when it first starts talking about circumcision, it says at that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelite men again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelite men at Gibeath Haraloth, or something. So I was interested in what the point of why flint knives, and so I did kind of like a little anthropologicalness, a little research into it, and I found out basically flint was super common. It's a pretty hard because a lot of the stuff was comparing flint and obsidian, which I found kind of interesting. But basically during this period, it was very common to have flint knives just because I guess it was easy to find in a lot of places. That's kind of what I read. And then not only was it easy to find, but it was hard and durable. It also could help make fire, right? So that was really helpful if you were, if you had a knife on you or any kind of weaponry on you that could also help you make fire. A multi-tool. Yeah, circumcised. Trying to see if there was anything else. Um, yeah, okay, so that's kind of the first. That's just kind of the first thing. So then it kind of talks about. Literally says this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the people came out of Egypt who were males. All the men of war had died in the wilderness, along with the way that they had come out of Egypt. Through all this, the people who came out were circumcised. None of the people born in the wilderness along the way were circumcised after they had come out of Egypt. For the Israelites wandered for 40 years. So all nations, men of war who came out of Egypt had died off because they did not obey the Lord. So the Lord vowed never to let them see the land that he had sworn to their fathers and given us, a land of flowing milk and honey. Here of their sons in their place. It was these Joshua circumcised. And the men had been circumcised along the way. So basically, it was sort of like a rebirth, right? Because circumcision it's a physical attribute of men that gets done. Um, that was first done through Abraham. That was like, this is a physical embodiment of you denying part of yourself, of basically this sheathing of your masculinity. You're giving, for there's other terms I could use, but in this term, like basically give a part of yourself that's probably the most vulnerable and one of the most like sensitive, right? If you look at nerve endings and stuff, like this is going to be your foreskin is one of the most sensitive areas of your body. So, giving that to God, basically saying like all my masculinity and the most like vulnerable part of me, that's God's. Like I'm entrusting this vulnerable part to God. Also, I'm making my penis look different, which is kind of scary. Yeah, it's weird to do penis talks when talking about the Bible. It's kind of strange, and I don't know how I feel about it. But it is how we're designed, so I feel like we kind of got to face it a little bit, face it head on. Um, so basically, yeah, he was basically saying like all the men, all these men that used to claim that they were gods, that were in Egypt, and they all complained and they all betrayed him. Their promise is done, and so now we're gonna take you men who are gonna enter. You guys are now that you're entering into the promised land, now you're going to be circumcised. Now you're going to make this promise, that you're going to give yourself to God, and God is going, that you understand and believe that God is going to look after you. And so kind of sort of that rebirth idea of like, and also like you were wandering in the wilderness. There was all this, there was all sorts of stuff that you were in the preparatory stage. You weren't necessarily, all throughout this it talks about how, right, the Israelites in the wilderness were having a rough time. They were fighting with God. And so now this is their chance to go, hey, you guys have been fighting. You're uncircumcised. You're like wild beasts. You're like the rest of the world. While I'm trying to while I'm informing you and teaching you all the different rule and the law and how to live better lives and live more holy lives and righteous and physically safer and cleaner. And basically now that I've been prepping you, now that you've gone through all this, now with these new men who are prepared, now I'm going to circumcise you. And so it is interesting. Like, they made it a point to mention the fact that the men had to rest. That they made a camp while the men recovered, because that's a lot of men that had to recover from. They had to stay in place for a little while. They weren't marching into battle when you just got circumcised. May not be the way to go. But yeah, and then Joshua kind of ends it with, today I have pulled away the disgrace of Egypt from you. So that kind of consecrates that, like, here we are, God. That circumcision is now this, like, kind of that last piece that was like God being like, you're mine. I got you now. All this evil, all the past, all the mistakes, all the issues that happened in the wilderness and before, like, all that, we're moving on from. Now is when we'll start anew. And so that's kind of just a really cool thing. Another really cool thing is that it happens literally after 40 years, right? And says, when Joshua was near Jericho, looked at them, saw a man standing in front of him, drawing a sword. Oh, no, I'm not there yet. That's an exciting part. I'm skipping ahead. Well, these are camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho. They observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month. So, during this time, right, the Passover is when they enter Egypt, or no, not enter Egypt, when they exit, right, when they finally run to freedom, and they enter the wilderness from Egypt, and then here they are 40 years later, at Passover, resting, right, resting at the camp, when the Passover happens, and celebrating the meals. And then again to that same thing of like, wow, our time is finally over. Like, we're finally stepping into a new chapter of God's provision and the way that God is going to lead our lives. The manna, right? The manna stops coming down. So now they're eating crops of the land of Canaan. So basically kind of this transformation of, you've been surviving off of what God has given you in the desert and what he survives, and now God is giving you something new. It's not God is like trading you, but now it's saying you've persisted, you've been through it. It was a rough time. We had a lot of difficulties, but now that you're in the promise, now that you're where I can take care, now you're where I want you to be, where I wanted you to be 40 years ago. Now the land, we're gonna be able to take care of you, and I don't have to keep. Now there's more abundance. Now you don't have to, and it talked about the whole. It doesn't mention this, but I think back to them complaining about the fact that they're eating the same thing every day and eating the manna, and that they're like, we want more. And if they had been patient and if they just trusted God, then they would have had that opportunity, but they didn't. But their kids, the kids and the young people, they got to experience what it was like. That like, oh, God provided God was willing. God, we just had to be patient. And now in this new era, God's saying, yeah, this is yours. This is what you're meant to have. This is what you should have had all along, but this is now what you have. And now, yeah. And so I just think that's kind of a neat little thing. And that happens with Passover and kind of that full circle moment, right? But this is where it gets kind of crazy. Commander of the Lord's army is what this section is called. So when I first read this, I didn't understand it. So I read it like 5 times, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening. So when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, Are you for us or for our enemies? Neither, he replied. I have now come as commander of the Lord's army. When Joshua bowed with his face to the ground in worship and asked him, what does the Lord want to say to his servant? The commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, remove the sandals from your feet, for this place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did just that. Now, the same thing gets told to Moses. Let me try to remember when it is, because I think it's when he's on Mount Sinai. Yeah, the cloud, Moses, Aaron. I'm just gonna go all the way back. I'm sorry. This is probably gonna take a long time, but I feel like I have to. I feel like this is important to go back to and try to find it. Boo doo 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 do 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 bum 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 bum. Why is it not telling me? Why can I not remember what it... Oh, then the angel of the Lord appears at the bush. Oh, here we go. Found it. That took a little bit, but I found it. Moses in the burning bush. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. This is important, right? Physical manifestation of God appears to Moses in the burning bush. Do not come closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for this place where you are standing is holy ground. So it happens then. It might also happen when I'm on Mount Sinai. I feel like it probably did, but I don't really want to look for it right now. So, right? And so here's that exact thing, right? The physical manifestation of God, the angel, this man, with a sword, which, if we remember Revelation, there's another person, Jesus, appears with a sword, riding in on a sword, and is the commander of the Lord's army. And so, basically, Jesus appears to Joshua. That's how I interpret it. Yeah, Jesus appeared to Joshua in the Old Testament, just like he wrestled Jacob, and appeared to Moses. And so Jesus is there the whole time. All throughout this, we're mentioning the Spirit. I'm going on a tangent. But yeah, that's just a super cool thing, because I was like, oh, commander of the Lord's army. Also, that's where it starts. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. That's all I can think of. But that's just super cool. Of being like, oh, Jesus appeared to Joshua and says the exact same thing he says to Moses. Does he say the same thing to Abraham, maybe? I feel like maybe he did. Of like, you're standing on holy ground. But I would have to... That's a later thing. Anyway, but we'll focus on the fact that Moses did it. So that connection of like, Moses led them into... Moses helped them free from Egypt, right? And kind of starts this whole transformation part. And then Joshua, who's leading them now, is experiencing the same thing. So God is doing the same thing. Basically, he's preparing them the exact, kind of with these parallel lines. And then, Jesus coming to the disciples and prepares them in the same way. And so he talks to them in a little bit different way. But still the same kind of idea of like, he's there with them every step of the way. And they're like, okay. And so that's super cool. I think that's just a super cool connection. But yeah, so this is a little bit shorter, which is probably good because, yeah, talked a lot about circumcision, but but Jesus showing up, that's really dope. And that's, I mean, like, that's the thing I think rereading through the Bible and reading through the Old Testament with the knowledge of the New Testament, it creates this thing that's like, oh wow, like things start making more sense and start appearing, and so, um, yeah, start making more sense and start like, whoa, noticing new things. So yeah, that was that experience. But I hope you have a lovely day. I hope that was kind of informational or at least interesting, to get a new perspective on. So